당고대 ngana zoge pe jigab chimbuge jelu Nibati Arigi United States of America's national anthem by Tenzin Kunga.
And the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the light that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Sumbati ngana zoge pe jigab ke tendalia ani tandapato so le ta jinge kangalo ta di shungita kasur jigab ke tendalia kona sule tensoge ani kasure semsoge di nyange kamachik
Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome our guests here. We have Amy Tincher, Chief of Staff, Office of Governor Mark Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith. And we have Senator Roger Chamberlin. And we have Senator Carolyn Lane. And we have Minnesota Human Rights Commissioner Kevin Lindsay. And also we have the former presidents and the former Central Tibetan Administration civil servant. And all the Tibetans who have gathered here, and all the supporters who have gathered here to commemorate this 58th National Uprising Day. Today is a historic day, and today, especially today, is a very historic because I just came from Minneapolis. Minneapolis City Council passed a resolution on Tibet. The resolution contents have current situation in Tibet, which is very drastic. Last year, Chinese government started destroying Buddhist Larungar, largest Buddhist academy in Tibet, and also to show a support to all the Tibetans in Tibet, and especially it shows that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not only a Tibetan leader, but also a world leader who everyone look up to at this time as a peace ambassador who goes around the world and talks about peace, tolerance, inter-religion tolerance relation. So, and then the main important on the resolution this morning was the dialogue which is hung up right now between Chinese and His Holiness Central Tibetan Administration to resume that as soon as possible. And also today, here to all the guests and the Tibetan community member, again, I wanted to stress how important it is for us on this day in 1959, Chinese armies were going to arrest His Holiness, and hundreds and thousands of Tibetans in Lhasa, all the walks of life, came up and demonstrated for the safeguard of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And from that day onwards, it became National Uprising Day. So I will go with the program. First, we have Amy Tinger from the Governor's Office. So I welcome Amy Tinger, Chief of Staff, to read the proclamation from the Governor's Office. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Capitol. On behalf of the Governor, I'm presenting the proclamation. Whereas the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota and Tibetans around the world will gather on March 10th, and Tibet has distinct religious, cultural, and linguistic traditions, and spiritual leader, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, is recognized for teachings on compassion, tolerance, and nonviolence while promoting human rights values, secular ethics, interreligious harmony, and preservation of Tibetan culture. And the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota was founded in 1992 to serve more than 4,100 Tibetan Americans living in Minnesota. And the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota is committed to preserving Tibetan language, culture, heritage, and religion. And Tibetans are hardworking Minnesotans pursuing their liberty and dreams in the state of Minnesota. And whereas March 10th, 2017 marks the 58th anniversary of Tibetans living in exile, now, therefore, I, Mark Dayton, Governor of Minnesota, do hereby proclaim Friday, March 10th, 2017 as Tibet Day. Thank you.
On behalf of TAFM, all the Tibetans and supporters gathered here, I would like to sincerely thank and appreciate Honorable Governor Mark Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith for declaring today as Tibet Day. And I also thank you, Jamie Tinger, Chief of Staff, to read the Tibet Day proclamation. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we have Senator Roger Chamberlin. Senator Roger Chamberlin, as most of you here knows, has a relation with Tibetan American Foundation, Tibetan community here in Minnesota. He has been connected to TAFM for the last few years and very supportive on Tibetan issue. I would welcome Senator Roger Chamberlin to say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here. Never thought I would be standing in front of all of you on this day. This is a great thing. So thank you, and thank TAFM and Cal Sang, who I first met, for allowing me to speak here today. It's sincerely an honor for me to be here. As he mentioned, for the last several years, I've been able to get to know many of you, and I can say truly you're an amazing and wonderful people from what I have experienced and what you have endured over the years. Memories are good things, both good and bad memories. Sometimes we'd like to get rid of memories, but if you get rid of the bad stuff, you get rid of the good stuff. But they kind of make us who we are, in part. Today we're here to remember 1959. The world has changed a lot since 1959 and the Uprising Day. We have television, cell phones, the internet have made the world smaller. Information travels faster. We can stay connected to each other much easier. And we can learn more about the universe and everything around us than we could ever have dreamed. But even though we have all the information in the world at our fingertips, most of us view our existence through the lens of something bigger and more important than anything of this world, our faith and our freedom, something that all of you have been denied in your homeland. This is the essence of what makes us human. It's how we understand our world, where we've come from, where we're going, and what might be waiting for us when our time here is done. My worldview is shaped by my faith. The decisions I make here in the Senate, decisions with my family, and how I treat people, it's important to me. Like all of you, it's ingrained in me, to my very soul, and my every fiber of my body. But unlike Tibetans in their homeland, I live in freedom, and I've been able to freely express and practice my faith for my entire life without worry of persecution. But those freedoms have been ripped from you. For 58 years, Tibetans have suffered under the heavy yoke of Chinese oppression. Under Chinese rule, as you know, you've been deprived of the most basic rights: freedom of religion, expression, speech, and association. The Chinese have taken political and religious prisoners and left Tibetans with no say in their future. Thousands have died and suffered under Chinese occupation. And as you are all well aware, many thousands have had to flee their homeland and then learn different languages and start a new life. No matter where you're from, humanity shares a few common values that cross borders and time: liberty, democracy, freedom, values that are not unique to Americans, ideas and values that are ingrained and embedded, basic human rights burn in all people, no matter where they're from. Tibetans want the same things everyone else would like to have: to live in peace, to practice their religion, provide for their family and their children, and give their next generation more and better opportunities. The only way to eventually solve this problem is through peaceful, constructive discussion. So I would join others in supporting calls for the Chinese government to sit down with the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, to begin that transition. It starts by ending human rights abuses, by ending religious persecution, and taking of political prisoners. Tibetans deserve the opportunity to decide their own future, to set their own course for success, and to live in freedom. Tibetans, as I have found, are an incredibly resilient, peaceful people. As long as we always endeavor to stay committed to our principles, that we have certain inalienable rights, then God willing, one day, Tibet will be free one day again. Until then, we'll remember the thousands of monks and nuns, men and women and children who have died under the occupation, and others who will remain resolute in seeing a free Tibet. Until then, Tibet will live in your hearts and souls and minds, and will be brought to life wherever you are, and then you will keep it alive wherever you are. So thank you very much. God bless you, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Senator Roger Chamberlin, who has long relation with us, and we wanted to keep that and going, and we may bring some requests or problem in future, but I request, please help us and keep the support going. Thank you so much. Next, we have Honorable Senator Carolyn Lane. As everyone knows here, Senator Carolyn Lane has very deep and profound relationship with us, the community. When His Holiness Dalai Lama visited here last time, Senator had an opportunity to welcome His Holiness Dalai Lama. And Senator Carolyn Lane has been very, very supportive for Tibet cause, Tibetan communities here in the Twin City. And I welcome Senator Carolyn Lane to have a few words here. Thank you.
Well, I'm honored to join you here today to observe the 58th anniversary of the 1959 uprising in Tibet against the Chinese occupation of your country. That occupation had begun nearly a decade earlier, and 58 years ago, the people of Tibet said enough. And to this day, Tibetans and supporters hold in our hearts all those who have struggled for freedom and lost their lives in that struggle against communist Chinese occupation. To this very day, that struggle continues. Right now, the Chinese government is working again to control the Larungor area, tearing down homes and evicting people. This 37-year-old monastic encampment and institute has been a center of Buddhist teaching and influence. I sorrow for the sadness and devastation of the people and their lives. And I honor the nonviolent response to this destruction, a nonviolent response that is so fundamental to Tibetan Buddhist religious life. There is a powerful moral authority that comes from this nonviolent stance, based in truth and virtue. And because that moral authority is powerful, it is often attacked by those who seek power over others. Despite outer appearances, we know which is really the more powerful in the long run. That moral authority and inner strength is also what maintains hope. And so those of you here in America, here in Minnesota, have a duty to keep that hope alive. You do that partly by keeping your culture alive. Your distinct language, art, music, dances, cultural traditions, and religious way of life is your responsibility to preserve. With this, you offer a gift to the world of warm-heartedness, compassion, peace, and nonviolence. I so appreciate the warm-heartedness and friendship you have offered to me and many others. There are practicalities in carrying this responsibility of keeping your language and culture alive, of teaching your children. You need a larger center. I will be working with Dolkar and Sonam to see if there's any way the legislature can help you in that mission. We are thinking of it as a Tibetan educational center. It may be hard to find a way to help you, but we have to try. We have to hope. And so we stand together in purpose and in hope. We send our love to the Tibetans in Tibet, in India, everywhere in the world. We stand with them all today. We do not forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Senator Carolyn Lane. Yes, she has been very much involved into the Tibetan Educational Center. We need a larger center than what we have right now. So we will be working with Senator Carolyn Lane, and also we will be asking for support from Roger Chamberlin too. Please give a big hand to Senator Roger Chamberlin too. He has visited few times our education center, and he knows about the conditions. So I will keep that information to you in the future. Thanks again for the Senator Carolyn Lane. Next we have Minnesota Human Rights Commissioner Kevin Lindsay. We invited Human Rights Commissioner Kevin Lindsay here because especially right now the situation in Tibet since last year, destruction of Larungar, the Buddhist academy, and also the restriction of movements, especially later last year, beginning of this year, when His Holiness Dalai Lama gave a Kala Chakra teaching in India. Usually every time when this big teaching is given, thousands come from Tibet for the teaching. But last year, a restriction was put on where more than 6,000 or 7,000 Tibetans from Tibet has arrived in India for the teaching, but they have to go back because their passports were made invalid, and also gave a threatening that if they are working for the government, their position will lose. If their children are studying in government school, it'll have a problem. So on those consequences, most of them, all of them went back, couldn't able to attend the religious teaching with His Holiness this time. So situation in Tibet right now, on the basis of human rights, religious right, it is a grave, drastic situation. So I welcome Human Rights Commissioner Kevin Lindsay here to speak a few words. Thank you.
Again, my name is Kevin Lindsay, and I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. I bring you greetings on behalf of Governor Mark Dayton, and thank you for the warm introduction. And I appreciate the opportunity to address the Tibetan American Federation, or Foundation of Minnesota today as you recognize the 50th anniversary of the Tibetan Uprising. The founders of the United States, in declaring the independence from England in the Declaration of Independence, said that all people have certain rights. And those rights include the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Simple, yet profound. And yes, we know that the founders were not as inclusive as we are today in our understanding of equality of all people, given the history of our nation and the slaughtering of indigenous people, the disgraceful stain of slavery in the United States, and the legal subjugation of women as nothing more than chattel. However, the declaration was nonetheless profound, especially when it's coupled with the principal idea contained in the first sentence of the Constitution, that we are committed to striving to a higher moral state, to being moral people, as we strive to create a more perfect union for ourselves and our progeny going forward. Striving, evolving, not settling for the status quo, truly trying to adhere to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The First Amendment of our Constitution provides that we as individuals, we have the right to express personal ideas and thoughts. We as individuals have the right to associate or not associate with individuals or groups. And we as individuals have the right to worship the religious deity of our choice. Religious liberty is a bedrock principle which is ingrained in the foundations of our nation. Religious liberty is a civil right. It is a human right that is a part of us being on the world stage. The United States has exported many things, but none greater than this idea, this concept, that religious liberty belongs to all and that it should be cherished. The importance of religious liberty rings true today as it did as the founding of our nation. Unfortunately, the clarion call for the importance of religious liberty has not been heard by everyone. As been articulated by both Senators Chamberlin and Senator Lane, there has been a denial of human rights, of religious liberty to Tibetan people, and that has gone on for the last 58 years. And that there is a need for all to sit up, to stand up, to be vigilant, to be heard on this issue of ensuring that religious liberty is provided to Tibetans all around the world. So therefore, I thank the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota for its work, its actions, and its deeds, and for raising the collective consciousness of us here in Minnesota as well as around the world as to the importance of religious liberty. Thank you for all you have done and that all you will do going forward. On behalf of Governor Mark Dayton, thanks again to the Tibetan Foundation of Minnesota for the opportunity to speak here today and to join with you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the Commissioner Kevin Lindsay for your kind word and supporting words. And I, on behalf of TAFM and Tibetan community, request whenever you go on meeting or meet another dignitary, please refer the current situation, what's going on in Tibet, especially human rights, religious rights. Those are very important to us, and thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. Gonda, kunzo chelape yosala, kuranzo committee meeting che, ani ondinde chidu tagi tatanda ngazo zerim di pui da pyoge na ma yon che, ani kuranzo pena digidus lani shuin tochena. Tatale ngazo de Minnesota miman sangma de zom che sumju thutin lo ngapchu ngapge khowe ki ani thutin di zegunan go ore an dela thari phenge genduba namba ani ngazo leje suba namba ani ngazo gyule suba namba ani miman sangma mangbu phesha thuchena 니모 다리 니모디 개침부 시우지 차용고래 먼저 단디 표현랑로라 내단 단당이 인지나 셰번의 시 다니로 최저간의 개침부지 차용고도 라룬가 또리에다 통콩원체나라 아니 표바 표현의 팽에든 조파 로고의 차 라케든 조 상마 매워스 딘조 상마직 내당 따윤두간에 변항로라 내당 자 차로 동에 더지 차윤구도 다디 ngajibu mare de peba penge changma kemba da ure chidu changmi khengi yore ina ta nge dela genji khiche de thari she uchigidu ani dinyamdu ta nima thari ani shoge chuzu gebala ngazumage mingap chu special Minneapolis City Hall la zomche ani Minneapolis City Council ki phedenga la thuju di yagu shu chungsus la ni shuei manjumage Minneapolis City Council City Council choksum yore choksum changma phesha choksum changma la kamuna chungsu jedapye chungsu ani Quran so gyapju na resha ani thande thojodi galange chi shuna samsu thojodi ta thale ngaju Minnesota na la khechimbu chi chayungo re thanda thojodinde shayundu maomba mikta chisachi da ngaranso dela ta pyogi kanyo 쇠 마투나 아니 규릉부지 가지고 쇼고디고 안에 마음바 나란서 pyogi 수연자 쉔바남바 데케교든 수기 직 갸블로 따사 자우지 니돈 줍들라 데 나란서 미겐바 남바 디캅라 저주지 샤요레슬란다 디제라 마음바 가지고 귤렌 남바기 쿨레큐엔체 딘데 난기레 치두 온딘데 로다르시 직 시티 셴다딘데 나란서 딘데 샤투나 아니 저주딘조 직 쿠란수기 record nal de dukane ani mikta chisa chita gyablo tasa chita ani shenda city ki na wada china jemalo city of Minneapolis ki nidon danilo nidon chudun la na re tat gyami ki nenshu khazu te na shena chigo mares mikta chisa chi yores la ne ondi ke chimu chayong gudu thale mage Minneapolis City Council ki thojo di nanglo la nge chik man ne don je shuna sams khazan tari ge nimude ngaju jana shungzap Chicago Council General Quran rangi sai gap che ani tisual tadi thojo di duguyowa phage gemi shungzap ta dinzo ha khoyungdo khailana di chik seda chin yore tanda Voice of America la nge ki interview chi chin ngaju thagyana doyor ngaju Facebook na yore chidu changmana yudu chik ma changma chik seda ji cha yundu gane gemi shungzap na tadi neju khe chimbu ji cha yundu thale gemi shungzap Councilor General Quran rangi sai gyap che tari ge nimudela 아니 City Council member re la chari di tangche 아니 shenangone ta dinala tigyo joja di nge shubaraji na dinderesha nam gyundu gyamigi gyana shungi ta mabiji shedea yorwala konsa gyamgen chumbu ta pyoba senjona yunge dinzugi pyo khate tae res 아니 konsa gyamgen chumbu 아니 gelon ki namsa shuche 남사 교연체 레가디 시련가를 지기 요레스 라야다 아니 벽이 직동고 영업 중하고 숨주 뒤제 니모디 게란디 직 구자 욕보 딘데기 네즈레마도 디케구지 인데 게란다 딘데케 마레슬라네 아니 네즈디레 다디 쿠란조기 마위디 마란 땡에 저지 차용구도 니게 갑텔라 단당한주 죄죄 땡에 엘란드로 케노 tari gunyi mushoge di tari kela josha tari gunyi mushoge ngala devana che ta digi khapte la nganzo yigi godus City Council la ania nga legal le rete ina nge thuzo chutön che yigi thine ma tai chidu nge yigi di nanglo la sewu thi ye dinala yogyo tat dinala yogyo gemi gi thanda false propaganda yogyo di changma mawi reswala ani thande nganzu 변난기 내다 아니 konsekyamgen chumbu다 비미 딕수기 람초 konsekyamgen chumbu zambuling korai gyapche dromi topta shide tadi inji signal na peace tolerance interreligious relation on dinje nang ne thandabado pheche nobe singda na yore ari na lo laina congressional gold medal ta tilel ha yo mare on dinju sangman na yundu gane dinju chie inde mendu dagar na yigin dinde ta yundu gane city council dinzoe Kuranzo gyami gi tandaba do shake de gyo di mabi imba Kuranzo pangda Kuranzo tyoenge doji cha yungudu on di chik shue yin an thari mage city council na la cha chubu yaguji chungs phenge changmala thoche 아니 답마기디 대화 수행에 디 징멜라 나레 투체 슈에이 이나 슈도게다 창망 안주나이 지디 창마 달레 레졸루션 디 창마 나란조 콘스초다 비미딕주기 단달람초다 창마가라 디와스 예 온데네 치니 쿠란조 죄자딘조 야구시우 나샤 안 죄자딘조 나니 개치슈디 타된델라 아니 콘세 감견침보다 비미딕주 갸나 슝 아니 가면 단다 가대교디 강교교 난고도슬라니 고주니야 온디 다 개침부지 차용고도 다nga tuzu shida malen che thande nedan di ta inde dawji re an thalen de phenge changmala thoche shwe yi thoche na gonda tanga de sozo imbe chane ta tanda 중지게 내가 지디게 미가 셰삼바 kamala des chambana che 용구민도 지디 아니 kamala kuch natnangro chisa ani ngegi dela kamala nyamdola zerimda de zuchik ti yuduga ne ngegi chik shendi du ta lelha cha che ani ngede chik shudigi 지디 양 온디 슈엔 현다 양 가르치기나 소소 호라 데 창마 내가 창마 호라 지기도 디 간데르 주두고나 삼네 삼기 유기래 온 디슬라니 슈엔이 도체나 당한조 단대 갑라 proclamation city of Minneapolis ne rayore 아니 proclamation city of Minneapolis jelo yange di nimalhamula di pume sokbani depe nandala
Samala tashdele ani nga Minnesota pume sokbe thoni city of Minneapolis ki Tibet Day ki proclamation picho. Whereas on March 10, 2017, Tibetans will gather in their host countries to commemorate the 58th anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising against the occupation of Tibet and to honor more than 1 million Tibetans who have died in the struggle for independence. And whereas 153 Tibetans have self-immolated while calling for freedom and the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet. And thousands remain missing or arbitrarily imprisoned for simply expressing their views or writing poetry or singing a song about the situation in Tibet. And whereas the occupation and ongoing suppression of human rights and freedom in Tibet and the continuous degradation of culture, religion, and annihilation of the Tibetan people's identity should be a concern of all. And whereas all freedom-loving people must call on the government of China to end its crackdown on Tibet and enter into substantive dialogues with His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama to find a negotiated solution. And whereas it is only fitting that as we recognize Minnesota's Tibetan community commemorating their 58th National Uprising Day, we affirm the determination of the Tibetan people in Tibet and in exile to retain their heritage and protect their protected from destruction and against overwhelming odds through nonviolent and peaceful means. This proclamation was signed by Betsy Hodges, Mayor of City of Minneapolis. Thank you.
Tochena nimalamla ta dije la ngazo proclamation ya City of St. Paul ne rayore City of St. Paul ki proclamation jelo kyange di tenzi pemula ngazo shunu RTYC de perona
Tashle
I'll be reading the proclamation by the City of St. Paul. Whereas on March 10, 2017, Tibetans will gather in their host countries to commemorate the 58th anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising and honor the Tibetans who have died as a result of this conflict. And whereas the occupation of Tibet by the People's Liberation Army, the ongoing suppression of human rights in Tibet, and the continuous degradation of Tibetan people's identity has alarmed the international community. And whereas Tibetan Buddhism and its exiled spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, are recognized for their teachings on compassion, forgiveness, and tolerance. And whereas the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota, based in St. Paul, was founded in 1992 and has over 5,000 Tibetan members committed to promoting and preserving the Tibetan culture, heritage, and religion. And whereas the Tibetan people in Tibet and in exile are determined to defy the overwhelming odds and use peaceful means to protect their heritage from destruction. Now, therefore, I, Christopher B. Coleman, Mayor of the St. Paul City, Mayor of City of St. Paul, do hereby proclaim Friday, March 10, 2017, to be Tibet Day. Thank you.
Tochena, Tinsipamla. Ta nganzo yang proclamation city of Richfield ne thalen rayo re the Richfield the ten thangbu cha yungdu on the jelo yange phume chokwa ne tenzil hadun la pherochi
ngachu dele changmala ninga di Richfield khaji proclamation loi ale okay. Whereas on March 10, 2017, Tibetans will gather in their host countries to commemorate the 58th anniversary of Tibetan National Uprising against the occupation of Tibet and to honor more than 1 million Tibetans who have died in the struggle. And whereas the occupation and ongoing suppression of human rights and freedom in Tibet and the continuous degradation of culture, religion, economic, and the annihilation of the Tibetan people's identity should be a concern for all. And whereas Tibetan Buddhism and its spiritual leader in exile, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, are recognized for their teachings on compassion, forgiveness, and tolerance. And whereas the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota was founded in 1992 and over 4,152 Tibetans, many of whom live in the city of Richfield, is committed to promoting, preserving the Tibetan culture, heritage, and religion. And whereas it is only fitting that we affirm the determination of the Tibetan people in Tibet and in exile to retain their heritage and protect it from its destruction against overwhelming odds through non-violent and peaceful means. Now, therefore, Michael Howard, Mayor Pro Tempore of the City of Richfield, proclaims this day as March 10, 2017 as Tibet Day in the City of Richfield. Tuchina.
Tochena Tenzil Hadunla. Tanganzo proclamation City of Columbia ne yore undi jelo yange tashi dunte gangchenpa youthful umelamne.
Whereas on March 10, 2017, Tibetans will gather in their host countries to commemorate the 58th anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising against the occupation of Tibet and to honor more than 1 million Tibetans who have died in this struggle. And whereas the occupation and ongoing suppression of human rights and freedom in Tibet and the continuous degradation of culture, religion, economic, and the annihilation of the Tibetan people's identity should be a concern for all. And whereas Tibetan Buddhism and its spiritual leader in exile, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, are recognized for their teachings on compassion, forgiveness, and tolerance. And whereas the Tibetan American Foundation of Minnesota was founded in 1992, has over 5,000 Tibetan members, many of whom live in the city of Columbia Heights, is committed to promoting and preserving the Tibetan culture, heritage, and religion. And whereas it is only fitting that we affirm the determination of Tibetan people in Tibet and in exile to retain their heritage and protect it from destruction against the overwhelming odds through non-violent and peaceful means. Now, therefore, I, Donna Smith, Mayor of the City of Columbia Heights, do hereby proclaim March 10, 2017 as Tibet Day in the City of Columbia Heights. Dojana.
Tochena Tashi Dendo Kanjepala, Youth for Women Lamne. Ta DJ la nganzo ta keche dinzo chayungudu pimidigzu ne thale kasha ki sungdi di kunga tilesala ki pyina la lo kyonangire ani kunga changme kingire nganzo shungshab na re ani chozo na re ani thande kabla nganzo labje ki sanju labje ki coordinator nangyo re an kunga tilesala de perona tuchi
pimidigzu Kashane, Sungdi Namadingama, Dojan Shugi, Terine, Page Jasa Lansar, Chelo Chikdong, Jangabjungagulo, Chokasum, Pimi Seja Pomo, Geja Tonga Mangwe, Madresaba Chindi Gone, Jamal Shungi Zensola, Shibe, Gelan Chene, Longabjungabje, Corbe, Tudeni Mochayo, Terete and Anzo Petinsi. Miri ji che do lu so long jo lu tang nang ke de son yong la ji den tang jamal shung ki du su ji si ju ho pi mi sa ya chi la de dong so wa tang pe ji gon de ja sha gu ju ko je la la to shi so tang wa je la chen su shu ji tu zi xin yin de ri ne che jing ne nyang ye che ge ba shi yin na che xie ne bo ba che ge ba tu zi xi yin jing Tene Chelo Chikdong Jangabjungagulor, Teringi Nimon de Pimitsu, Dosa Chikdi Jama, Shunki, Pesa Yongla Sewa, Dusu Chevala, Pene Pimi Yin, Dalelame Wangcher, Tuji Cheva Samjo Gue, She So, Shive Gone, Pemi Monkey, Mundu Sunday Cheyu, Pimi Rawa Gelangi Nimo, Lemni, Kap Hasani, Hachang Tamraji Nedan or Ye. Tenya, Chinda Sumbeni, Trakshe Tepe Puma, Nadong Zamdang, Mami Langur, Dongcha Niva, Rudi Dane, Lase Tongje, Yusatabu Jurde, Piminam, Jinga Chimping and Nation Yu. Debe Tirap, Che La Nang, Piminam de Jajungi Duksutang, Changnaji Siju, Kadu Chisam, Yangi Chungmi, La Madebar, Perawata, Pimicheta Rishung. Ki Koyu Sumjo so ji che rangi lu so longjo so le tang tang lagwar chelo jikdong gubje ni dong jume jame jume gune tabar pena melo jadan shibju shenga pena pemi jadan shibju shenga yi shenla seba maje par ranglu mese tangde pela rawa ge konsa chamgo chimbo cho pela dende shu ge She Pimi Window Sunday Che Dede Shishu Piminamji Shima Membe Ningdoptang, Jura Mebe, Laksamla, Dene, Peja Chita Rishun Minum Jingzita, Pimirawan Tapsa De Shin Semi Shive Gone, Junjong Tuba Mase, Neseja Contorton Tuba Chungyu. Terre Zamling Jaga Mango, Uti Tang, Shumang Jene, Pime de la, Jabjor Tang, Tongsi Nyamji, 제대로 도시유 대야 나로 아리 신신 구십 오바마 초당 비밀라나 메베 우리 제노 공사 잠글 정부초 남니 제테 난급 아리 신신 초기 우멜람지 시주라 잡저리바 마세 공사 쪽의 구접당 자나슝의 구접월 대면 대비 최면 제거바 라양 꾸만랑예 대신 님의 구십 렉스 라센초 아리 치시 통제 구샤 대면 낭외 난급 공기 베이징 시중내 전제 배송함 달래라마 쪽의 구접당 내 주문 용탑 레 미투 꾸마 제주인 바당 공사초라 제재장 휴지인 셰소 렌든 나와 제소 이란 시와도 잡지 고급디 당되네 신신사바 구십 도널드 트럼프 초라 삼리당 아리숑기 베드 베토 잡절 하라 나웨 레바 휴지인 할로 유럽 제소지장 자나숑라 베제 심의 자수 기베 렌전대 여바당 자나숑기 최시된베 돈에 라룬거 도시당 저주남 세wan기 친비 동시바 전주 숙제낭외 돈에 자라기 뒤지샤유 대신 수수 통제 지네와르 냠레 자소진 로와미 톱당 렌소지 속진탱 숨지 소주베 응업도 자소지 라완데베 로와미 톱당 토 체케베 미나투기 라룬거당 야첸거니지 양아베 내당당 자나숑기 제지 로아미 톱당기 점지 칼라 스메지 변한기 로아미 톱당 라 답시 당 슈루토 담라 첨부치지 예베 되모 닥담 숙제시 배유 신신 시진핑기 저 자나기 위세 고디 쇠 자나 땡리 용어 탄섬 송접 개바당 탄섬 송접 용어 별라 땡리 개거당 양 데트 델레 셰바 디지 괴나 덴자 닌송 체괴 세베 시주 송데 별라 배사 용라 담다 하장 첨부 제지 예절 별랑정종 미만 십조 칸세베 레드 년도나 카달랑 오고 집에 탑수 뺄때 예드 예솔라 팀루 따르동 동대 땅이 거당 대당 별랑정종 지구에나 델로 메장 직동 자의 십지 시중 진송다 메장 직동 등적 구주 고선라 팀도 제여바 용라 제여 최대랑와 예고를 자나 미만 진정 작업지 사진 된제 수르민랑 사유 나 비미스 토 팀디 강다 면진비 세주 락들 제신유 대내 말로네 고속대 자나숑기 셰시된베 토네 세다 나리나 땡로 링기 취재 자준 동자급의 대강 도시당 세왕기 자준 진비 대송 야첸간이장 주마 칙동점 신비당유 신비당의 자준남 건대 현랑 주슈 미쳐바당 추추지 제고양 강양 배미쳐바 소지 내당 제자 점리 용접 인배 십제 휴마고토 대신 자중의 출루 레든 지 출루 레든 지 소위 세배 짜주 소 짜주지 초용네 된담 당진 제배 시주 락더 제신유 자나숑게 공사 잠근 첨부 초기 들로 낭위 등골 왕진이 팀결당 첩시지 락제 인골 인수 제바 마세 변의 등골 왕진 쇼어 롱겐남 강고당 시주 락제 치두당 매바스바 시든심베 심바소 교가 낭수 실로급의 생각당와서 무슈 유순네 담라 제유 군진 천세 따른 점리낭 요거 전정바 망슈테 자리 현재 비미주마 다쇼 흉기 레제 임바 소야 시저 유가도 요거 로주당 대신 년제 타는 낭배 내진가도 내진 로주량 자나숑네 시조 락지 로주 Sensing Jiji Mase, Dovio Kamsunji Piminam, Pyoji, Saja, Nangudu, Niente, Tang, Negor Sosu, Roger Yang, Kango Tang, Tamra Hajan Chimbuji, Bena, Nature Dome, Kumbum Gombar, Chuntu Molam Jikap, Mami Borgentram de, Trazin the Pimi, Chunjawanam, Jinganji, Jinta, Jigwata, Angra Jegube, Nedan Suyu, Deshin, Dome, Luchukune, Naba Taxan, Flame, Kiti Gombe, Logorji, Chamdang. Chamdang Amjebas, so Jaldun Ronkenam, Lampardu, Kango Chebaso, Chungdu, Jana Shone, Pimisor, Jana Mima, Jindin Jacobjo, Jimbang Shendan Dravar, Chijo Lakjir, Topta Yabatar, Te Guju, Te Rujutang, Chosung, Page Saja Nangudu, Dundu Ramatro, give a chen, Nebo Jujin. Shenya, Pimi Chutim Shenya, Pimitsu, Timtin, Toptan Sunjabtan, Mundo, Ta, Shive Gone, Tempazamji, Zinsong Sunjutan, Tangneso, Jejin, Bena, Dashi Wangjuki, Page Ki Sunjabche, Timtin to Shudu Chebar, Kadraji Yemi Zugde, Sunju Cheyu, Deshin Dome Amjo. Yusu Pimit Namji Mirab Ne Mirab Bar Chukur Chayuji Larry Jana Shungi Terka Mongdunchi Koyu La Nejun Tongshiba Tedang Yang Kan Menya to Terkan Dumbe Zeri Chi Koyu Pakso Sheba Je Susur Sane Pimitsu Koyu Sungjib Chegube Rindun Chebar Niedoba Mango Tangde Tangnun Cheyu Tuni Piminam Gujo Zamya, Chebe Rawa Meberte, Utu Tapseji, Ranglu Mesik, Tonguji Neda, Yang Sushin Yu. Malu Chinta Jungi Nang, Tashirab Denji, Ranglu Mesik Tangne, Dedons Jurye, Tena Pimit Tamra Chijur, Samjo Tang. Nimin Chiri Tangde, Kanyar Sunju Chebe, Piminam Trodu, Lotu Tonguba Jojiin. Pimitone, Tamra. Chiyu Soji, Nedangor, Jajinindo Khanijang, Southern Tubjure, Tayang, Shilo Nidong Judu, Loi, Arishungi, Chude Rawa, Roami, Topdan Korji, Nidenang, Janaki Chude Rawate, Mixe, Donagube, Jacob Gu, Tendun Chebe Nang, Suyeba Mase, Neda, Malole, Chidudu, Chimbayang, Kodu.
Taking this opportunity, I once again congratulate President Donald Trump on his election. We are encouraged to see the new Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's assurance that the Trump administration will continue to support the Tibetan cause, receive His Holiness Dalai Lama, and continue to encourage dialogue between Beijing and the representatives of Tibetan government in exile or the Dalai Lama. In December last year, the European Parliament demonstrated its concern about the issue of Tibet by adopting an urgency resolution on Tibet, calling on the resumption of dialogue with the Tibetan representatives to peacefully resolve the issue of Tibet. The urgency resolution condemned the demolition of Larungar. In February this year, on the eve of 34th session of UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, in a rare and bold move, 6 independent UN experts made public a joint statement on a range of human rights violations in Tibet, particularly on the case of Larungar and Yanchengar. In a sharply worded statement, the UN experts expressed alarm over China's violation of international human rights laws and wide-scale religious repression in Tibet. The Chinese government under President Xi Jinping's leadership has taken an alarming position on Tibet that states, quote, China's security and stability is dependent on Tibet's security and stability, unquote, based on which individual Tibetans are having to give up their security in return for gaining harmony. Such strategic approach warrants increased repression in Tibet. The recent report issued by the Intermediate People's Court of Tibet Autonomous Region points to 1,446 cases of detention and 1,793 cases of indictment in TAR alone in the year 2016 in a widespread crackdown on Tibetans under the pretext of punishing criminals. The Article 36 of China's constitution guarantees freedom of religion, but in practice, China's State Council had revised the regulations on religious affairs to directly control all religious affairs in Tibet. The Chinese authorities have begun demolishing Harungar Institute since last year. This resulted in the forced eviction of monks and nuns from the institute to realize their plan of reducing the 10,000 plus residents to 5,000. The evictees are forced to sign a document pledging to neither return to the institute nor continue their practice in other monastic institutes in their hometowns. Similarly, around 1,000 nuns were forcefully evicted from the Yangchen Gar Institute. The situation is akin to the revival of cultural revolution in Tibet. For Tibetans and Buddhists, this year began with the successful conferment of the 34th Kalachakra initiation by His Holiness Dalai Lama in Tibet. However, the Chinese authorities labeled the Kalachakra teachings as illegal. Travel restrictions were imposed on Tibetans in Tibet to prevent them from attending the Kalachakra teachings. The returnees faced interrogations, had their passport torn or discarded, and were kept under strict surveillance with their mobility rights restricted. While millions of Chinese citizens with passport are able to travel freely around the world, however, Tibetans in Tibet, including Communist Party members, are denied passports and face restrictions in their travel, even for medical and educational purposes, needless to mention for pilgrimage purposes. A Tibetan blogger in Tibet wrote, "Getting a passport is harder for a Tibetan than getting into heaven." Not only for travel outside Tibet, stringent measures restrict movement within Tibet from Kham, Amdo in eastern Tibet to the capital city of Lhasa, even if the purpose is to visit families and go on a pilgrimage. Even within provinces, severe restrictions are imposed on local Tibetans, as reported during the recent Badalam festival in Kumbh Monastery and the annual Cham dance in Taksang Lhamo Kirti Monastery. In a blatant disregard for the feelings of the Tibetan people, a week ahead of the Chinese New Year holiday, the regional government in the Tibet Autonomous Region made mandatory placing of 1 million portraits of the 4 generations of Communist Party leadership in homes, schools, and monasteries. We call on the Chinese government to end the discriminatory policies, issue travel documents to Tibetans, and respect their freedom of movement within and outside of Tibet. On the environmental front, the surge in unregulated open-air mining activities in the sacred mountains of Amcho and Minya County last year was met with widespread protests from local Tibetans. Given the severity of the case, the UN experts have cautioned China on the environmental impacts of the mining activities at Amcho. As per the international environmental law, mining should be environmentally sustainable, culturally sensitive, and economically beneficial to the locals. The arrest and detention of Tashi Wangchuk, a bilingual education rights advocate charged with separatism and now awaiting sentence, is a glaring reflection of China's violation of its own laws that guarantee minorities with the right to use and develop their spoken and written language. Such repressive policies have driven Tibetans in Tibet to resort to desperate measures. The last case is that of 33-year-old Tashi Rapten, who died in self-immolation protests in December last year. The 2016 annual report of the U.S. Congressional Executive Commission designated China among the countries of particular concern. The Amnesty International report 2015/2016 pointed to increasing restrictions on Tibetan monasteries by the Chinese government. The 2016 Freedom House report ranked Tibet in the second worst in political and civil rights after Syria. The 2017 Freedom House report pointed to the Chinese authorities' imposition of severe constraints on the religious practice of Tibetan Buddhists, most notably veneration of the exiled Dalai Lama. The report further mentioned that new measures imposed since November 2012, including punishing assistance to self-immolators, cancelling previously permitted festivals, increasing restrictions on private religious practice, and more proactively manipulating Tibetan Buddhist doctrine and selection of religious leaders. Given the international condemnation of China's Tibet policy, we once again call on the Chinese leadership to renew its wrong policies in Tibet and revisit Hu Yabang initiated liberal policies on Tibetan people. Ultimately, the Tibetan issue can be best resolved by adhering to the win-win proposition of the middle way approach and resuming dialogue with the envoys of His Holiness the Dalai Lama as reiterated by the US government and European Parliament. The Kashak's 55 vision draws upon His Holiness's maxim to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. This envisions resolving the Tibetan issue in the next 5 years through the middle way approach, but at the same time ensure that the Central Tibetan administration will survive, strengthen, and sustain in order to carry forward the Tibetan freedom struggle for the next 50 years. In exile, the Central Tibetan administration is putting its best efforts to strengthen the social foundation of the Tibetan political struggle. In December 2016, His Holiness the Dalai Lama conferred the historic Gishima degree to 20 nuns. This year, the Kashak unveiled the revised version of the Tibetan Women's Empowerment Policy, subsequently convened the first Tibetan Women's Empowerment Conference. Such concerted efforts are aimed at realizing His Holiness's vision of seeing Tibetan women contribute to global and peaceful leadership in the 21st century. The Kashak has designated March 12 every year as Tibetan Women's Day. While the exiled Tibetan community is a successful model and the non-violent Tibetan movement continue to inspire other global movements, however, there still exists a fringe group of Thölgyel propitiators who, under the garb of freedom of religion and speech, continue to denigrate the accomplishments of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and discredit the Central Tibetan administration. They have sadly become a pawn in the game of Chinese government's power politics. We condemn such vicious insinuations and urge them to renounce the wrong path and embrace the right path. To further galvanize the global Tibetan movement, the Kashak is observing year 2017 as a year of campaign. The year 2018 will mark 60 years since Tibetans first set foothold in exile. We will therefore observe 2018 as a year of gratitude to express our deep appreciation to the governments and people around the world, in particular India, for extending their hospitality and unwavering support over the last half-century. We thank the National Endowment for Democracy for presenting a citation in recognition of the democratic institution of the Central Tibetan administration as envisioned by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We also thank USAID for providing certificate of appreciation to the Tibetan Medicare system. We thank the governments, leaders, and parliamentarians, the Tibet support groups, freedom-loving people around the world for supporting the just cause of Tibet. We thank them for giving us the impetus to forge ahead, notwithstanding the indomitable challenges that come our way. In particular, I would like to thank the parliamentarians in Japan, Canada, and the United Kingdom for hosting me and supporting the just cause of Tibet. This sends a clear message of hope and encouragement to Tibetans in Tibet. During the long life prayer offering made on the final day of the Kalajagra, His Holiness the Dalai Lama reaffirmed his commitment to live for more than 100 years. I, on behalf of all Tibetans, express a heartfelt gratitude to His Holiness for his benevolent commitment. At the same time, I urge every Tibetan to take heed of His Holiness's advice and earn collective merit. While keeping unity as the paramount goal, we must pledge to renounce any regional or sectarian affiliations. Finally, we express our fervent prayers for the long life of our beloved leader, His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet. May all his wishes be fulfilled. May the non-violent cause of Tibet prevail, and may we soon realize the joyful reunion of Tibetans in our homeland.
Tochena losanamrula nganzu gyule ta de hello chik senro na de nesu yaguchidu tanda nganzu shoge Minneapolis City Council la nganzu chinche Quranzo la phebe neta keche she ani phagela phe nganzu phebe rikshun changma demde nang che 총두 추조 구반의 초래 아니 간주 배경기 Tojo di ledu nganzo kugab rasu keje sheche ina dikab la wosho luyo mare Kuranso chongdu gi jodan la thari Minneapolis City Council chuju gube chongdu di nanglo la Kuranso gi tönse mangbuji du ondi tönse sangma chaani 아니 tönse re la wosho lugudu tandarang nga information tandarang len rasu nganzo pödön gangi tojo di chimu nane Minneapolis City Council 쪽숨 창막이 겹죠 나샤 다 딜라 창마에 차다브로나 제도 쇼게 다디 개충부 시부차 연구도 다리 게라 개미슝잡 카운슬 제너럴 코란 랑키 Minneapolis Council 미랭오레 멤버 미랭오레라 차리 땅체 이나이 간조대 베바 대댕에다 뷰리지든 속바 베베 베날 도심바 간조 장댕갈 두구요와 공사겸근 전부 뷰미딕수 라 갭조 아니 동생 남게 시부 개침부지레 삼구도 아니 꾸지 고네 차지다 브로치 다 달래 대 제림칙 마도 요 말에 딩게랑아 토질레비지 슈나 삼수 다 달래 대 nganzo thari sumji thuje di cha chubuchi da des thalen Tibet action year like cheru gyacheru tae di chidun sokbo rangi chik soshana kale khabu shu chagi do nganzo de gyunle changma thanglan che part time da chidu ta dinang lo la charo nange ani nganzo de governor legung ne ani ngade geyon Tibet de charo nange de tenzi dogala charo penangso Andina shi nganzo de sanju gilabda chigan cheru doe cheru raela tanda nganzo de bezun gyule da nyamdo nang de tanda Senator Carolyn Suwana shi on di ani changme gi charge da ro chi islan shue ani niba de la banda City Council gi thoje tanda nge kong la shuwana shi jingmela gi dewa di nganzo chu nang che 아니 슈도 개베다 창망 아주 지든 속바 genle 지메 오겐라기 대와디 베 펜토스 참에 아니 차지다브로 치슬라네 부구슈에 아니 디나시기 델랑 아주 세네터 로저 chamberlin 페디 아니 계산경라 안정게마 중지 낭에 쿠란게 로바낭체 딩엘라 대와 상부유디 온두 대와낭수 아니 계산경라 투지체 슈에 차지다브로나 Andina shi nganzo de Human Rights Commissioner Kevin Lindsay de pay di ani nge dorla shui dorla gi dewanang che de thanda Human Rights Commissioner pay re ani dorla sawala toji che shui charge dabrona ta di tadun de la 아니 게 주의직라 땅에 소소인 배차네 다른 숨주 뒤제인 배차네 내 다른 미망부질레 외차네 게 직숨 슈나삼수 개치셔디 권사겸근 전부 뷰미딕수 변나 뷰미자드 다디 개침부 슈차용구도 딩안저 안기 당보체 니바델라 안저 뷰리지든 속바디 차용구도 뷰리지든 속바 데네다 마옴바 차추부 차야다 숨바델라 아란조 데 뷰미 미네소타 융의 창마 독자 직디 제디 개침부 차용구도 아잉에 소소인 배차네 딘주 숨라 강투도 나로 지슬라니 비규 슈에 도체나 당안조 미만 랑루 아니 숨주 텐루 안조 게라 넘버 듄라 페로나 아니 디교에 딩냠도 단다다 디젤랑 안조 마 센폴 곰조 조에레 아니 게라 남바다 아니 디네 곰트 페마퉁에 딘데다 아니야 온디데 요나 데직 슈로나 가서 데 미니 슈즈지기 단다 데 지두 남바 데 슈요레 디나로 총두 조디기요레 코란조 레군라 간조 지두 세네터 더 리프레젠테티브 페바 대심바기 사쿠 듄스지라 어포인트먼트 서요 다디 어포인트먼트 디 지두 넘버 2체 아니 지두기 레제 2체 아니 코란솔라 다린 니마 다린기 숨주 뒤젠 개든 개침부디기 대셰칙 pyo nang lo dan pyo ki zadyon ki de she chik di nyam tu ani ngaran so pyo chidun sokba la sanju ki labda che chik dan on dinde ki maomba de la ta nganzo Senator Caroline Lane ki ani Chamberlin Kuransu gyabjo na ne chojo tyon che bonding bill dinde na ere dila gyabjo na ro chis la ne thanda ne mi thu ne ani keje she go do ondi kechum bu cha yin di ondi thu yin chi du gela number sanju gi lapta gela de pe yo na gela number de shuro chis ma pe ro chis tile wesala yore ani gulen number ga she chi de shu andine shenda ga she ji de shu na 아니 배바 가시지 슈체 아니 간조 데 지두 투에 투체나 아니 게라 넘버 데 페로치 미말 랑루다 숨주 텐루 교엘 투체나
아니 디젤라 숨주 텐루
Rayu la som ta gyami narchu kanda ta chochu ka sumge bunda rare se ra yu cho ke tenda gyami martu chi du chi je ma je samne tengu rangi sem rangi tun rangi kona me pa kaje ku mo kashi tu ne yonzo benjo rawa te la bu chu ga sum gi bunda kaje ku mo kashi tu ne yonzo benjo rawa te la bu chu ga sum gi bunda
Stop the killing! Into it! Stop the killing! Into it! Stop the killing! Into it!
Stop the lying! Stop the genocide!